If you're from Louisiana, you've probably heard of Our Lady of Prompt Succor. Otherwise, maybe not. Our Lady of Prompt Succor is the patroness of the state of Louisiana, and rightly so, because she's got a history that goes pretty far back. But before I go any further, you're probably wondering, why would the Blessed Mother have a name like Our Lady of Prompt Succor? Well, think about the French origins that Louisiana enjoys. And let's think about a little something French, and we can start in Richmond, Virginia. There's a hospital in Richmond known as St. Mary's, otherwise known as Bon Secours. Bon Secours is a French name that means good help. Well, Prompt Secours would be the French name for fast help. And Our Lady of Prompt Succor is in fact associated with fast help. Okay, how do we get there? Well, we're not French, we're Americans. And in America, we tend to corrupt foreign languages. So if you take Prompt Secours, fast help, and translate it into Americanese, Prompt Secours sounds a lot like Prompt Succor, and maybe that's how we got the name. Well, at any rate, that's my idea. Our Lady of Prompt Succor um, has been a patron in Louisiana for quite a while, even from the time initially when the Ursuline nuns came to Louisiana, and they had a statue in 1810, actually, some years after they had become fully established, of Our Lady, who had given them fast help. And this is what the French version looks like, which is actually the National Shrine version. There was a time when the period of Louisiana was under Spanish control, and under Spanish control, we still honored Our Lady of Prompt Succor, but with a Spanish flair. Here's a Spanish version of the same lady. And recognizing the fact that the Ursuline nuns, when they came to Louisiana, established a school that was for everybody, not just white Europeans, but also including Creoles. Here's a statue of Our Lady of Prompt Succor as envisioned in the Creole version. Okay, so much for that. The story of all of this, to get it right, we have to begin with the origin of the Ursuline nuns. Many people think of the Ursuline nuns as a French order, and for the most part they are, but actually the Ursuline order was founded by St. Angela Merici, who was Italian, and she founded the Ursuline nuns in 1535 in Italy, in Brescia, Italy. St. Angela Merici was very strong on the idea, and the reason why she founded this group of nuns was to teach young girls specifically. And when you get this idea that the whole Ursuline nun establishment is founded primarily on the idea of having nuns that would teach young girls, then you might understand, well, why do they call themselves Ursulines? And who is their patron? Well, the patron of the Ursulines is Saint Ursula, who was an ancient saint back from Roman times, 383 AD, and she was a martyr. Don't want to get into too many details about the story, but she was very wealthy. And she was, very wealthy. And part of what she was to do was to go and marry another wealthy person, but she converted to Christianity. And as the story goes, she was going to her wedding accompanied by 11,000 female escorts, all young girls. And along the way, they were waylaid by pagans, and St. Ursula and all 11,000 of her companions were martyred for the sake of Christianity because they refused to give up Christianity. Well, that's the story, and she is a recognized saint. She's got a feast day. However, in recent years, like within the last 100 years or so, the church has begun to question the actual story of St. Ursula, and there is some possibility that there may not have actually been a real St. Ursula. It might have been a fictional story. But at any rate, she was real to St. Angela at the time that she founded the order, and like it or lump it, the Ursulines are named after her. Well, let's bring us a little bit more up to date. In 1726, in France, where the Ursulines were quite well established, King Louis XV got it in his head with this land that he owned in Louisiana, wherever the heck Louisiana was, somewhere over in North America. King Louis XV says, I've got a bunch of French noblemen that are actually trying to make a go of it in Louisiana, so I shall decree that 3 nuns from that Ursuline order shall depart from Rouen to New Orleans, and their mission shall be to provide an education for the young girls of wealthy families over there. So let it be. The king has spoken. Well, the Ursulines in France took the king kind of on his word to send 3 nuns over there. Actually, they sent 14 nuns. And in 1727, 14 Ursuline nuns arrived in New Orleans, and they kind of took at liberty the order of the king to teach children of wealthy families. And they said, sure, we'll teach the children of wealthy families, but we'll also teach the Native Americans, the Creoles, the rich people, the poor people, the slaves, as well as the free people. And that's what they did. They established the first girls' school in actually the current territory of the United States, modern-day United States. They established a convent, and this was, in fact, the oldest school for girls in modern United States, and they're very proud of that. So the Ursulines began in 1727 with this school. During the course of the next few years, 1763, Louisiana actually fell out of French control and into Spanish control, which is why we have a statue of Our Lady of Prompt Succor that's got a Spanish motif to it. And later, in around 1800, the territory came back to Louisiana, back to France from Spain. However, a slight problem. Napoleon was in charge of Louisiana around 1800, and Napoleon was not very good to Catholics. In fact, Napoleon had the Pope imprisoned and made life very tough on these Ursuline nuns in Louisiana, and many of them fled Louisiana to Havana, Cuba, and some other places. So in 1803, when the United States purchased Louisiana from France and the territory came under United States control, this was a new thing. The United States, as you know, was founded on the principle of religious freedom for everybody. And so the Ursuline nuns were invited to come back to Louisiana to continue their school. They were a little bit frightened. And so their head of their order, their Mother Superior, wrote to the President of the United States and got a letter in reply. It was Sister Therese de Saint Xavier, Sister of the Order of the Nuns of the Order of St. Ursula in New Orleans. Thomas Jefferson himself wrote a letter to the Ursuline nuns saying, if you can't read it here, let me just read you what the letter says. I have received, Holy Sisters, the letter you have written me, wherein you express anxiety for the property vested in your institutions by the former governments of Louisiana. The principles of the Constitution and government of the United States are a sure guarantee to you that it will be preserved to you sacred and inviolate, and that your institution will be permitted to govern itself according to its own voluntary rules without interference from civil authority. Be assured it will meet all the protection which my office can give it. Thomas Jefferson. Well, that was pretty good. And so the Ursulines went back, and on 2 occasions they had a need to pray to Mary, the Blessed Mother. One, there was a great fire in New Orleans in 1812, which threatened to burn down the whole city. The Ursulines prayed to Our Lady, and this was 1812, and asked them to spare their convent from the fire. Well, wouldn't you know, the Great Fire of New Orleans in 1812, which decimated a lot of the Vieux Carré, stopped when it reached the Ursuline convent and did not burn the Ursuline convent. It burned everything up to it, but did not burn the Ursuline convent. 3 years later, the Battle of New Orleans was being fought in 1815, and Andrew Jackson, with a small force of about 6,000 men, was facing the British with a force about triple in size, and it all happened just outside of New Orleans in a place called Chalmette, Louisiana. And the Ursulines prayed again to Our Blessed Lady, save us. And wouldn't you know, while Andrew Jackson, the story of the Battle of New Orleans, that Andrew Jackson really didn't have enough troops to beat the British, but the British, by mistake, because it was foggy, marched into a swamp and just about all drowned in a swamp. 15,000 British soldiers on the plains of Chalmette fell into a swamp, and that gave Andrew Jackson his victory. Thanks again to Our Lady of quick help when they needed it, prompt succor. Here's a picture that's kind of famous in New Orleans that indicates Our Lady of Prompt Succor, the Ursuline convent, the nuns praying, and Andrew Jackson defeating those British troops. And it's pretty good. Now, in Louisiana, there are lots of churches that are dedicated to Our Lady of Prompt Succor. Here's Our Lady of Prompt Succor Church in Chalmette, site of the Battle of New Orleans. Naturally, that would be a good place to have a church for Our Lady of Prompt Succor. Here's one in Westwego, Louisiana. Very nice. Here's Our Lady of Prompt Succor in White Castle, Louisiana. In New Orleans, there are parochial schools named after Our Lady of Prompt Succor. In particular, there's a high school, and the Ursuline school for girls is still in existence after all those years. And in New Orleans is the National Shrine of Our Lady of Prompt Succor, which of course is located at the same place as the Ursuline Convent and the current which is the current Ursuline Academy. The National Shrine in New Orleans looks like this. Very, very impressive. Of course, I got to say, something else that keeps Our Lady of Prompt Succor still visible to New Orleanians is the fact that she's the one that you pray to when there's a hurricane. In fact, there's the sign. Our Lady of Prompt Succor and hurricane season go together. If you're worried about a hurricane, go to Our Lady of Prompt Succor. And not to be overlooked, New Orleans, you think of Mardi Gras. Even there, Our Lady of Prompt Succor had a role. Here is a set of beads that was caught by, I think it might have been my sister-in-law, from a Mardi Gras float from the Rex Parade in 2018. And wouldn't you know, here's a set of beads that they're throwing off a Mardi Gras float dedicated to Our Lady of Prompt Succor. I don't know where she got the black eyes, or the infant Jesus got the black eyes, but there you have it. So that's the story of Our Lady of Prompt Succor. And Our Lady of Prompt Succor, pray for us whenever we need quick help.